What I love so much about Mr. Holland's Opus is that this is a movie that even if you're not, passionate about music, everyone can relate to Glenne Holland in this film, played by Richard Dreyfuss, because he's the type of character because everyone's had a point in their life where they've had some type of dream and some type of vision on how they think their life is going to be, and it, of course, like 90% of the time never pans out that way. This is the story of an aspiring composer who takes a day job as a teacher, and although at first it's kind of something that he's not really into, he's just kind of going through the motions, and he has a discussion with his wife, played by Glenne Headly, in the beginning about 4 years of saving, and then you'll have nothing but all the time in the world to compose after that. Of course that changes when he finds out that his wife's pregnant. But it's just really interesting to not only see the time span of his teaching from the years 1965 to 1995, 30-year time, but it's interesting to also see the transition that he makes from becoming someone who's kind of just doing it for a paycheck to someone who's actually wants to make an impact and really teach people to what it takes to really teach his students what it is to understand music and what it is to love music. As someone who's an avid music lover themselves, I love seeing in the beginning and the intro when Glenne is working on this opus, that opus that comes to fruition towards the end. So it's interesting to see someone writing music in the terms of, actually writing it out note for note and then having all the vision in their head of the entire orchestra, as opposed to someone just writing a basic pop song on guitar or piano. So the first time I ever saw this movie was actually in 6th grade music class. It was one of the few times I didn't want to stick a gun in my mouth and pull the trigger. I don't know, I just remember being pulled in right away. And, I of course remember kids in class being like, oh, this movie's so boring, but, they just were soulless human beings and didn't understand the true nature of great filmmaking, clearly. Now, the movie was filmed entirely in Portland, Oregon, and I love how they pay homage to that by bringing up the Kingsmen song, Louie Louie, when Glenne Holland's making his first teaching breakthrough to teach a young woman how to play the clarinet properly. And I love the point he makes, too, because, because at first Glenne Holland says, there's more to music than notes on a page, and she's like, well, what else is there? And he's like, well, it's there's a lot more to music than notes on a page. And then he makes the point of I can teach you notes on a page, but that other stuff I can't teach you.
And being alive, and it's not about notes on a page. I could teach you notes on a page. I can't teach you that other stuff.
Which is such a true concept, because it's he makes the point that music is supposed to be fun. It's not about notes on a page. It's about feeling and rhythm and soul, and just, it's kind of something that's just inexplicable. It's just really hard to explain, It's a lot of people, when they first learn how to write music or compose any type of music, beforehand you might get this vision here, oh, I'm gonna make, these songs, I'm gonna make music like this, I'm gonna sound like this band, but it's you can't really you don't really know what you're gonna sound like and how you're gonna sound until you actually just get behind the guitar or the piano, and you gotta give it a little bit of time to develop your own sound. There's just so much that goes with it. There's also musicians that can only play by reading notes on a page. Then there's musicians that can do both, read notes on a page and then play by ear, and then some that can only play by ear, and they don't even know what notes or chord structures they're even playing, or intervals, or scales. So on Glenne Holland's first day as a teacher, he immediately becomes friends with Bill Meister, the PE teacher. I really love their symbiotic relationship because I feel like Bill is who pushes Glenne to become a better teacher, because there's a part where he's trying to convert his band into a marching band to get them ready for this big parade. And, the coach comes to him and says, see that kid over there in the stands, Lou Russ, he was the best halfback this school ever had, and I'm about to lose him for wrestling if I don't get his grades up. And so he's just trying to say, why don't you just teach him to play an instrument, any instrument, and I'll get them to march. And I think it's great when they're sitting playing chess and and he brings it up so, Lou Russ, is he gonna make it? I love the way he gets frustrated with Glenne, because he's right, he says because Glenne says to him well, if the kid doesn't wrestle, it's not the end of the world, and he says, makes the point of for him it is, if he doesn't wrestle, he doesn't have anything else.
About the kid. Bill, how am I supposed to keep a kid in the band if he can't play an instrument?
You teach him. You're telling me that you cannot teach a willing kid like Lou Russ to bang a drum or something?
I try.
And Glenne doesn't understand. He's just being so selfish and not wanting to put that heart and soul into teaching someone, to really get in their head, to really show them what it takes to become a musician. And not even just a musician, but just to work hard at anything. You know, and I think it's great when Bill Meister says to him, he's like, well, then you're a lousy teacher. There's a couple of subplots in the film, one being that, you know, Glenn and Iris Holland's son Cole is born deaf, so I think that pays homage slightly to Beethoven, in which, you know, Glenn makes that point in class, you know, he couldn't hear, of all people. And I love it too when he explains the whole theory behind the fact that, you know, Beethoven sawed off the legs of the piano and used to lay it on the ground, and he would just listen to the vibrations. And so I think that was kind of the beginning of just to show what was to become of the subplot of his son Cole, you know, and just the trials and tribulations that him and Iris were going to have to go through in order to learn sign language himself. Which I gotta say, yeah, Glenne Headly, who played Glenn Holland's wife in this movie, like, swing!
Swing! Swing!
One of the other subplots of this film actually kind of makes the film move kind of almost more in like a erotic drama kind of vibe. So the school wants to put on like a George and Ira Gershwin musical, and normally as someone who's not really that into musicals, I actually really enjoyed this part of the film this time around. I mean, it's been, you know, several years since I've seen it. And as soon as Rowena Morgan does her audition, like, as soon as I saw her, I'm like, why does she look so familiar? Then I, of course, had to look it up. She plays Tia Russell on Uncle Buck, you know, the whiny, bitchy older sister who's a cunt with a capital C. Yeah, absolute polar opposite character in this film. I mean, she's an absolute angelic human being. And she did all the singing herself. She's actually a trained dancer, singer, and of course, obviously, actress. But yeah, things eventually get pretty heavy between Rowena Morgan and Glenn Holland. I mean, especially the more they start practicing and getting ready for the musical. And then there's even a part where Rowena sees some of the sheet music of the song that Glenn's been working on, and she's like, will you play this for me? And he's like, I don't know, it's really late. So anyways, like from the moment he starts playing it, she ends up coming up with her own vocal harmonies for it, and she sits next to him. As soon as she sits next to him, you can kind of just feel it in their body language and the tension in their eyes and just their overall movements, that they are both like absolutely falling in love. And I think he kind of catches him off guard because he's not expecting it, but you know, this is just something that he's been wanting to do from the beginning of the film. You know, he's this aspiring composer, and it suddenly comes to fruition that he could probably go to New York and write music with this girl and, like, you know, eventually become famous, which he thinks he wants to do. But then he realizes that, you know, teaching these kids is what he's really meant to do. A couple of my favorite parts in this film is definitely once the marching band does the parade and they play their own rendition of Louie Louie. I think that's pretty cool. Then I also really love the part towards the end where Glenn and Iris' son Cole, you know, he just is listening to records downstairs on the record player. I got a woman way over town that's good to me. Some interesting trivia about this movie. Richard Dreyfuss in real life actually despises rock and roll, despite the fact that his character, you know, uses it to help a lot of people understand it on a deeper level. Yeah, so Mr. Holland's Opus was released in 1995, and it was actually directed by Stephen Herek, who did Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, which I have to say, that one is the way better one of the three that came out. Face the Music, the third one. And then, of course, you have the Mighty Ducks as well. But yeah, I just feel like in terms of Stephen Herek's filmography, this is the one that gets like kind of overshadowed. I mean, I think this is just such an inspiring like drama film, but also with touches of comedy as well. I think even if you're not necessarily the biggest avid music lover, I still think you should check this movie out. I mean, it's just an overall inspiring story. And you know, everyone's been there, you know, where it's like you think you want to do something, but then life just pulls you in a different direction that you wouldn't expect. Anyways, thanks for watching, and until next time.
I don't know where home is. I'm lost. Do you know where I live?
I don't know where home is. I'm lost. Do you know where I live? No.
Billions! Check out what's down there.
Billions? Hey, Dana. Do you want to see 101 Dalmatians tonight? We can share a tub of popcorn, or maybe we can score some nachos.
Ah, damn. Now I have to reconfigure the whole procession.
Have fun here. We're doing the best we can, damn it!
Who's Rowena?
Huh?
Who's Rowena?
You go to the corner, you make a right, you go 2 blocks. Two blocks, then a left for 1 block.
Again, please?
2 blocks on the corner, 2 blocks this way, 1 block that way to the left, and you're right there.
Okay, thank you.